Hello chess fans, welcome to Chess Lovers channel. Now I'm going to introduce to you my 19th suggestion of mine, Psychology in Chess, written by the Soviet Grandmaster Nikolai Krogius. He was also a psychologist by profession, so he's a very suitable man to write such a book. There are other psychologists, like for example Blumenfeld, also from the Soviet Union, and you could also think about a person such as David Bronstein. He would also be very suitable to write such a chess book. However, this is perfectly fine because Krogius is a very good writer, and he has also written, for example, this Endgame book, which I can recommend, but it's, I imagine, quite a rare book. So the idea with recommending books on this channel is also to recommend great writers, and Krogius is definitely one of them. There are not so many books about chess psychology. We have, for example, this one written by Paul Banker, Winning with Chess Psychology. And we have The Psychology of the Chess Player, written by Ruben Fine. And he was actually a professional psychoanalyst because in the 1970s he wrote this book, which is regarded as a very important one in this area. So Ruben Fine quit chess to focus on chess psychoanalysis. Krogius is actually critical of this book because he don't believe that chess psychology is about what chess players suppresses. So we will not focus on these books, at least not for now. We will concentrate on what I believe is the outstanding psychology book, and it's this book written by Nikolai Krogius. So how is this book structured? Just by reading the different chapters, we will get a very good picture what the book is all about. And I noticed that one important keyword is the word attention, which goes like a red thread in the book. So, contents: foreword by Boris Spassky, and then we have a preface, and then an introduction. And the introduction is about psychologists on chess, and then he mentions this player, psychologist as well, Blumenfeld, and what you can learn from him are mainly three things, but only two of these things are in this book. And the first thing is that you should always write your move before you make it on the board. And this was also, this was called the Blumenfeld rule, and I learned it from one of Kutov's books. But unfortunately, we cannot apply this rule because according to FIDE rule, we are not allowed to write the move we're going to make before we have made it. And there is a famous story when the young Fischer played against Mikhail Tal, that Fischer had written his move, and Tal looked at his score sheet, but Fischer could not sense any reaction that the move was dangerous. So he crossed over his move and went for another move, which was actually worse. So the reason the Blumenfeld rule cannot be practiced is because it can be used as a psychological weapon to read your opponent's reaction after you have written the move in the score sheet. But I remember when I was a young player, I used this rule, but now it has been impossible for several years. Another important rule by Blumenfeld is that if you have a force move, you should play it immediately, because according to Blumenfeld, and of course he's right about this, the visualization will be worse the more moves you have to think ahead. So his recommendation is always play the forced move, because then it will be easier to visualize the position, because you cannot trust your visualization. And he's absolutely right about this. Even Botvinnik has adhered to this practical principle. And it means essentially that you should always do a new analysis after each position. So you can call it the Blumenfeld and Botvinnik rule. The second rule is that you should note the time in the score sheet for each move. And this Blumenfeld practice I have also used in my own practice, especially when I was very ambitious and wanted to climb up the ladder and raise my elo, because then you can, afterwards, you can go through your game and with particular attention to how many minutes you have thought for the different moves. And in this way you can be stronger in the disposition of time. So I think the two last mentioned rules by Blumenfeld are very good to use, that you play force moves immediately, and that, according to Botvinnik, you analyze the position again. Even though you are certain what moves you should do, you might see some new things because the visualization would be much clearer. And the second advice, that you control your time, that you learn to be more disciplined by writing how many minutes you have thought for each move. Of course, you can do this in different ways. For example, you can do every fifth move, or only your moves. You don't need to care about opponents' thinking time. Anyway, Blumenfeld's advice are certainly important for practicing chess players. So this is written in the introduction. And then he's also talking about chess style. Chess style is something very important. The first player in history who really focused on different style was Emanuel Lasker, and he classified chess style in 5 different groups, and the first group was the classical style, and the second group was the automatic style. The third group, the solid style, where you build up your position, and the fourth group was a style where you try to induce the opponent to make arrows. and the fifth style, the combinative style. But Krogius is critical of this classification, and rightly so. It's not so easy to classify a player's style in such groups. But the most common way to categorize a player style is by only using two separate ways of categorizing a player, and that is combinative style contra positional style. And Lasker was critical of this division of styles in 1925. And Krogius then asked himself, how is the situation today? It should be mentioned that this book was written in the end of the 60s and based on books and articles written in Russian language. So this is only a small part of all Krogius chess psychological writing. But he mentioned the candidate matches between Spassky Tal 1965 and Spassky Geller 1968, and he considers the chess literature during this time that it has not progressed. They were still using mainly these two styles when categorizing a player, combinative or positional. But the problem, according to Krogius, is that if we look at combinative players like, for example, Neshmetanov and Toulouse, both are famous combinative players. But Neshmetanov's calculations can be more trusted than Toulouse, because Toulouse was mainly an intuitive player. So according to these categorizations, combinative contra positional, a combinative player is normally a good calculator and a positional player normally a good intuitive player. But Toulouse, he doesn't fit into these categories because he played combinative in an intuitive manner. And actually Mikhail Tal could also do that. So yeah, we can already here see the fundamental defect just using these expressions to categorize a player only into two groups. I know by my own experience that this is still very common, but I should mention there have been some attempts. For example, Lars Bo Hansen in this book has categorized chess styles in 4 different groups. So then we have the reflectors, which is like the positional player. We have the theorists, which are very good at dealing with force opening variations. We have the pragmatists, a player like Fischer, but also Lasker, who was a very good psychological player, but pragmatism is more than that. And we also have the activists, like for example, Garry Kasparov. Carsten Müller has, together with Louis Engel, continued this trend in a book called The Human Factor in Chess. So here Garry Kasparov is called activist, and Anatole Karpo reflector, Robert Bobby Fischer pragmatic, and Wilhelm Stein is theorist. Of course, this categorization is a good attempt, but it will not tell you the whole truth about a chess player's style, only part of it. And I have also tried to focus on this area in chess, that to categorize a player in a chess style is far from an easy matter. For example, I have written the book Ulf the Attacker, because Ulf is mainly famous for his endgame skill and his positional technical skill. But I have also shown that Ulf Anschuh could also play attacking chess in certain circumstances. And I also noticed when I wrote my book about Petrosyan, who is also mostly famous for his prophylactic and quiet play, like a boa constrictor, but he could also play very strong attacking games, like in this famous miniature game against Taimanov in the Soviet Chess Championship. So, yeah, we are not dealing with Eastern matters, and they are trying to discuss this, and Krogius is also critical of such classifications. He's also discussing great players, starting with Lasker, as a player who really gave great attention to the psychology aspect of the game. But Lasker's main focus was the opponent's deficiencies or strengths. For example, when he played the match against Taras, he knew that Taras could make mistakes in more concrete dynamic positions than if he could just follow his play according to the Steinitz school, according to Steinitz principles of how chess can be played. And then Krogius goes on to Capablanca, who defeated Lasker in the World Championship 1921, and says that Lasker normally did not play psychologically because he was more focused on his own plans. But when they come to the next world champion, Alekhine, who beat Capablanca in 1927, Alekhine, the difference with Alekhine compared to Lasker is that Alekhine was not only focused on the opponent like Lasker, he was also focused on how could the opponent prepare against Alekhine. So it means he also focused on his own weaknesses and strengths and took into account that his opponent could actually play against his weaknesses. So with Alekhine, chess psychology, especially chess preparation, took a step forward. And then he goes on to Reti, and Reti is a very interesting player in this regard, because according to Reti, the calculation variations can be very exhausting. So he believed very much, of course he was aware that he could in this respect also be regarded as too dogmatic, because he would mainly play according to generalizations in chess, according to principles, according to concepts. And when somebody asked him how many moves do you think you had, he said 0 moves. So this is also very interesting to take into account, that chess is not only about calculating variations, you can also play without calculating variations in Reti style. And then it goes on to another player, Torre, who also participated in this famous tournament in Moscow, 1925. And he introduced a kind of development of a chess player style. And the first stage is manner, and the second, individuality in play, and the third, chess style, and the fourth, world champion style. So, according to him, it was very important with the creativity, that the creativity is individual and original, and it should also be based on the accumulated chess culture according to chess masters' experiences. So this aspect of creativity comes into conflict with style, and that is a key thing, that you cannot classify players in such categories, because chess players can be creative, they are individual, they are original, and this must be taken into account. So that was a little bit the introduction to this book, which I find very interesting. We can continue to read. The first chapter in the book is called The Chess Image. And what does it mean by that? It does not necessarily mean a concrete position, the position that you're visualizing. He writes here that the image is a generalization which takes into account the peculiar relationships between the pieces and their possible moves. So when you prepare for a game and you know who's your opponent going to be, you should always take into account peculiarities, what is unique for this player, which you might exploit in your own game. And yeah, he continues the chess image with other subtitles like what is the chess image, the retained image, the inert image, the forward image. So this is a very interesting chapter. And the second chapter, intuition in chess. And here we have the important keyword attention in the third chapter. What is attention? Factors affecting attention. Unfamiliar conditions at the competition, one's position in the tournament, and the significance of the result of the game, an unpleasant opponent, the opponent's behavior. Very interesting psychological stuff to read in this book. Controlling one's emotion, the deliberate change of direction and content of one's imagination and thoughts, an arbitrary change in the direction and concentration of one's attention. Conclusion. Okay, we go to the next page, chapter 4. Some deficiencies of attention, the transfer of attention, instability of attention, the distribution of attention, dispersion of attention, the power of concentration, individual characteristics affecting attention, the extent to which attention is dependent upon the player's theoretical knowledge and experience, the extent to which attention is dependent upon fashions in chess, the dependence of attention on aesthetic views, the dependence of attention on style. So here it comes again, the question of style, how chess improves attentiveness. And chapter 5, what is time travel? Objective cause of time travel, inadequate theoretical preparation, inadequate practical preparation, the absence of training, objective complexity of a situation, conscious entry into time travel, doubts concerning analysis. And this is quite interesting because here we have an advice by Botvinnik, who emphasized that one must try to find a sensible ratio between the breadth of search and the existing time limit, at times deliberately choosing lower quality moves. So this is very interesting. It actually says that we should not strive to be perfectionists in the manner of, let's say, Rubinstein, Kasparov. We must find a good balance between pragmatism and perfectionism. So sometimes we must make moves according to a bad plan, then no plan at all. So the key thing here is not to make a bad move, because many times it's just a matter of style or taste, what move to play. You might have a choice between several moves, and you should not put too much effort into that, because then you might become a perfectionist and you will get into time trouble. So I think this is a key thing to get a feeling for when you should play a lower quality move. And of course you must know a lot of chess, because then you must know when you're doing such a move, when you don't think it's efficient or rather practical to look for the best move. So this kind of thinking is vital to become a good practical player. So such things you can read about in this book as well. And then the chapter 5, What is Time Travel, continues with doubts linked to an exaggerated importance of the opponent's individual style. So here we have style again. We have two important keywords, attention and style, which runs as a red thread in the book. Doubts linked to the importance of the game, doubts linked to events in the game in progress, doubts linked to the player's individual experience, doubts evoked by individual peculiarities of style. Chapter 6, Effects and Cures of Time Travel. The dynamics of the mental processes, the player's ability for generalizations and abstraction, features of critical thought in time travel, the tendency to simplify, the tendency to select relatively passive continuations, the tendency to overestimate the merits of the opponent's active possibilities, the negative influence of time travel, the logical components of thinking, intuition, style during time travel, practical advice. And for example, one practical advice which I have highlighted in this book is that a common psychological mistake is the attempt to speed up one's own play as much as possible in order to prevent the opponent thinking at my expense. And this is a very common mistake. I have my own experience of this, bad experiences. You have a one or at least a clearly better position, and your opponent has maybe 20 minutes for 20 moves for 1 minute, and then you rush it because you don't want your opponent to think on your time. So this is a classical mistake which has even happened on the highest level. For example, the 8th match game in the Botvinnik-Tal World Championship match. Tal had a clearly better position, but he thought if he plays quickly, Botvinnik would not find the best move, but Botvinnik found it, and Tal even lost the game. So, very important rule, always use your own pace, regardless of the opponent's time. Chapter 7, Tournament Tactics. I want to draw. I have to win on defeats. Chapter 8, Looking at one's opponent. Chapter 9, the study of one's opponent. Chapter 10, Know thyself. Under the X-ray, the psychological duel. Chapter 11, emotions in chess where there is a lack of information. Chapter 12, mistakes on both fronts, the chain reaction, important trifles. And then there is also an interesting appendix, the link between age and success, page 234, that is the end of the book. And I thought this was very interesting, especially the first time I was reading it, that how much does starting age affect the chances to become a really good player, and how long time does it take. So Krogius has looked at the following players and their starting age, but then it should be mentioned that what is starting age? Normally you say that starting age is when you learn the rules of the game, but in Engqvist, according to him, starting age should be when you are when you get interested in chess. In my case, for example, I learned the moves when I was around 10 years old. I don't know exactly, but I think I was around 10 years of age. But I wasn't interested in the game, but I became interested in the game when I started in a chess club. And then I was 12 and a half years old, nearly 13 years old. And I became interested in chess because I played in a competition, and the town's championship. It was a small town called Enköping, close to Stockholm. And despite the fact I became the second last player, I became interested in chess because you met all these people from different generations, and it was especially the experience of the chess clock, which meant there was another dimension in chess where you could win games by having better time and win on time. So anyway, so it took me 2 to 3 years to become interested in chess, and the key was to visit a chess club. But in this psychological research, Krogius has defined starting age as when you learn the rules. And we can also mention that Alikhan's starting age was 7 years old. And he has written somewhere that he became interested in the game when he was 12 years old. But Krogius doesn't think this fit because Alikhan was a pretty good player when he was 12 years old. It means he must have been interested in chess seriously before he was 12 years old. So, starting age when you learn the rules of the game. And for Sukertot, he was 7 years old. Spielman was 5 years old. Nimzowitsch, 8 years old. Capablanca, 4 years old. Lemmerfish, 9 years old. Alikhan, 7 years old. Ove, 5 years old. Ryszewski, 4 years old. Bondarevsky, 9 years old. Boleslavsky, 9 years old. And the average is 6.4 years old. And if we then compare with period of optimal results, it would take 15.5 years to have a period of optimal result. So if we look at late starters, like for example Shigurin, he was 16 years old, Emanuel Lasker 12 years old, Marocci 15 years old, Pillsbury 14 years old, Rubinstein 14, Wiedmar 15, Floor 14, Botvinnik 12, Lilienthal 15, Kultov 14, and the average result is 14.3 years. So we compare starting age 6.4 with starting age 14.3, and the period of optimal result is then 11.8 years. So we can see that if you're 14.3, you will be around 26 years old, while if you start when 6.4 years old, the result will be 22. So you will get an optimal result 4 years quicker if you are a young starter, 6.4, contra if you are an old starter, 14.3. But if we then look at another comparison where the starting age is 6.5 years old and GM result you get when you are 22.8 years old, compared with late starters who the average sum is 13.6 years old, the GM result comes 25.3. So the interval between young starter is 10.3 and late starter 11.7. So here we can see that it does not matter if you are a late starter, and that is probably because the training is more qualitative when you are older. So this is some good results for late starters. Today the picture might be different, but the main conclusion is that you should not worry too much if you start with chess when you are a teenager. Anyway, there are much more things to read. We're mainly focused on style now, and also what drawbacks and advantages it can be with being young or late starter of the game. But there are many things we haven't discussed at all, which you can find in this book. So hopefully you can order this book somewhere on the second-hand market. There are no new chess books about psychology, so this one seems to be the only really good one because it covers several aspects of the game, psychological aspects. So this was my 19th suggestion. I hope you stay tuned until I will suggest to you my 20th suggestion. So see you then, and thank you for watching.